Anna Lasky, welcome back to the show. Second appearance on Consulting Mastery, in fact.
Awesome.
If you recall, you came on a while back. Quick introduction, folks. Anna Lasky is founder, principal consultant of Ground Control Research. She is a bona fide expert in all things customer research, offer validation, and positioning. She is a key figure on the 90-day pipeline team, in addition to, her day job of running a consulting business. She also coaches our clients inside the 90-day pipeline on customer research and offer validation. And it's a topic that comes up a lot in the conversations that we have before people enroll in the program, and certainly inside the program as well. So we thought it'd be a good chance to just get on the show, talk about customer research, why it's important, where it fits in, when you need it, all things customer research. And before we jump in, I'm going to tell the Anna story. Okay. So I tell everybody when they enroll in the program is Anna was a client. The timeline's fuzzy to me. 21, 22?
2020.
When did you go?
2020.
2020 even. Okay.
Yeah.
Anna went through 90-day pipeline back in 2020. You'll see her on our case studies page somewhere. And she came in, she did really, really well. She got great results. And then she said to us, you guys talk about getting out of the building and going and like talking to customers and getting some data, but you're not showing anybody how to do it.
Yeah.
We were like, once you meet Anna, you'll realize that she's always direct like that. But accurately direct and to the point. And we said, you know what? Fair. That's not really our shtick. We don't know the ins and outs of how to do customer research. We know it's important, but we don't know how to do it. That was kind of the impetus for us to bring Anna on, have her engage with the program, build out a customer research method for the 90-day pipeline that fits the context, fits the audience, and is now also coaching. And we also, separately hired her to help us design our own customer research program for our business. And it's been a fantastic relationship ever since. So with that long-winded introduction, Anna, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
That was the Anna story that I warned you about. Not too bad, right?
Good. That was a good story. You never know with me what the story might be. So that turned out well.
So here's the common question on people's minds, right? Is how do I validate a B2B consulting offer? Before we get into the importance of customer research, which is obviously part of that equation, how do I validate an offer, and why do I need to validate an offer before I go out and do marketing?
Yeah. Which, let me start with the second question first. So why would I need a validated offer before I start increasing my marketing or turning up my marketing machine? If we don't have a validated offer, we could do marketing all day long until we're blue in the face and we get nothing as a return, right? So if you think about it, the way I think about it in our work with clients in 90-day pipeline and also just my own clients outside of it is 80% of your effort is going to be put into doing the actual marketing, right? Like if we look at hours worth of time, if we don't spend the time, the 20% of time actually getting really clear on the strategy, which offer validation is a big part of strategy, all of that 80% of time is totally wasted, or it's not as efficient in terms of the return we get on that time. So it's critically important to first validate an offering. And to do that, I'll go into your other question. To do that validation, it starts with actually knowing the target market that you are trying to validate an offer with. So oftentimes we'll see folks with like, oh, I have this amazing service and I just need to validate it. And my first question to them is, with whom, right? So we have to get clear on the target market. We also have to understand that target market enough before we create an offering to know kind of generally what's going to work. And then we create an offering and validate it with that target market. Does that make sense? Things have to match up. The target market, the offer, they have to match so that we can then do messaging around both of those pieces. That's what composes our actual marketing efforts.
I think we would spend an entire podcast episode talking about why customer research and offer validation has to come before marketing. We don't have that kind of time, but
sure.
The metaphor I like to use is lead generation or prospecting or marketing, if you will, without really solid offer validation and therefore strong bona fide positioning is like pouring water into a bucket with the hole at the bottom.
Right.
You can spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of energy lead genning, prospecting, marketing, and you're probably not going to have a lot to show for it because they're not going to buy unless you have a seriously validated offer with clear distinction
Right.
and differentiation in the marketplace. And if you don't have that confidence, you're probably not ready to get on the marketing and lead gen bandwagon. Question to you, and this is maybe a philosophical question, and I'm not sure if there is a right answer to this, but does audience have to come before offer, or can offer come before audience?
Yeah, so you can definitely have an offer before you have a finalized audience. I think in that case, it's really important that you're aware that just because you think an audience is the right audience for the offer, that doesn't make it true, right? And so part of it, the work there is to have a systematic way to approach evaluating different audiences and learning from each audience, like why it does that offering does or doesn't work. I think the other thing that's necessary for that path to work well is that, as the consultant, the owner of that offering, you have to be open to really hearing what's being said and making adjustments to parts of the offering to really meet the need of the audience, right? And I could list 100 examples of clients in 90 pipeline who are like, well, this is a bad market for me because they want me to do what I do, but also they want me to do this like one little extra thing for one extra hour, and they're willing to pay an extra amount of money for it. But like, I don't do that. That's not my offer. Right. And like, that's not the attitude, right? That's going to really help folks validate an offering in terms of validating an audience.
Yeah, and it's I think the shift for a lot of people is uh they tend to come in to their conversations with us and sometimes into the program with this like, I have this special thing,
Right.
I am a special snowflake, I am an expert, and I can't for the life of me understand why nobody wants to buy it.
Right. They just don't
Uh,
understand. Right. Yeah.
and the shift that I think you help people get through via the customer research, which we're going to dig into in more detail here in a minute, is, and I think it's the most important shift that happens in the program, is helping people go from thinking about themselves as a service provider and an expert to thinking about the customer from a problem perspective and gaining empathy with the customer on what things look like in their world.
100%.
That's the missing piece for a lot of people.
Yeah, 100%. It's that piece, and it's also learning. I always am describing this as learning a new language, right? Because you, in your amazing expertise, maybe most likely are speaking at a different level, or you're using different words than what's needed for you to really have to show that empathy to your client, but show them that empathy by communicating in a way that makes sense to them, right? And so how do you do that without, to use kind of an expression, dumbing it down? That's what we're really trying to get people to do, because we don't want to water down our expertise. We want to communicate our expertise, but again, through that language that's really resonant with that market.
Yeah, it's funny. I talked to someone recently who said, "Listen, I know what my market's problems are. I know what their pains are. What am I going to gain from customer research?" And my
Mhm.
question to them was, "Yes, but do you understand the language that they use when they're describing those problems?"
Right.
And that's a huge part of it, right?
Yeah.
Because you know, at the end of the day, we all have the curse of knowledge,
Right.
right? We don't know what it's like to not know what we know, and therefore you're probably not using the same language that your
Yeah.
customers are using to
Yeah.
describe their problems, and that creates an empathy gap and a communication gap.
For sure. And I think the other thing is consultants have a particularly strong skill in synthesizing a bunch of disparate pieces of information, such as different ways people say something, and summarizing it. Like a lot of the work we do is to summarize it in our own words, what we heard, right? That skill is almost like you're overpowered in that skill, and that undermines your ability to do marketing effectively, because in really great marketing, we're not summarizing, we're actually pulling language at its root as it was said, and we're using those pieces in our marketing. And so I think that's another thing that it's innate to us as consultants, that in the work we do in customer listening and 90 Day Pipeline, we really have to kind of reduce the use of that skill by putting people through a really defined process that kind of eliminates them having to use that.
So let's talk a little bit about how to do it right. So
Yeah.
this customer research process, what we call customer listening inside the program, but fundamentally customer research with the intent of validating a B2B consulting professional service offer. What's the right way?
Yeah. So there's a few steps that are what I would call the right way or what we see work for our clients. So number one is making sure that you are asking the right kinds of questions at the right moments. A lot of folks have an idea that effective customer listening starts with them going to a call and saying, "Hey, what do you think about this offering?" Right? I would say asking for advice and opinions from other people, even if they are in your target market, is like the worst way to uh, design something. Also, you're creating a power imbalance in that conversation where you just told that person that they have more authority, so they're probably not going to buy from you, even if they like what you're saying, right? Because you've just asked them, like, please tell me what to do, right? So the first stage of customer listening that we have folks do is really about getting to the root of, for their target market, relative to the industry that that consultant is in, and then what that consultant focuses on doing. What are those pain points? What are those desired outcomes? And what are the solutions or the ways that that target market is already solving for those problems? Because guess what? These people, our clients, are resilient and they're smart and they're amazing. And if you weren't here, they would still be trying to solve the problem another way. So we also need to know about that too. So that's really the first phase, is really understanding on that root level. And typically for our clients, even if they've been working with the same market for many, many years, they come out of that going, oh, I never thought of it that way. Because all of my previous conversations were always contextualized around my services, right? Around me saying who I am. In this conversation, you're not talking about yourself. It's all about them, right? So that's kind of the
So
first
just to
step.
underline that for a second before we go to phase two, and this was my experience when you made me do this. When we hired you to build our own customer research strategy, if you recall, we had a meeting and we built out the playbook around like, here's who we want to talk to, here's the interview
Yeah.
guide, right? And then we're like, okay, who's going to do the interviews? And I'm like looking around, right, the room, and you're all looking at me, and I was like, guys, come on, listen. Do you know who I am? Like, come on. Like, I have talked to, mentored, coached thousands of consultants. What am I going to learn by doing some customer research interviews? But you know what? We're paying on a, reasonably good money. I should probably engage with this process and try to get some value out of it as best I can, right? So fine, I'll do it, right? But I'm highly skeptical, right?
Mhm.
And then what I found was, to your point, all of a sudden I'm having conversations I've never had before. Because every other conversation I've ever had with a consultant in my target market, I'm either selling or coaching. One or the other. I'm trying to sell them something, or sell in friendly terms, like trying to persuade, get them into a program, or I'm coaching and delivering and offering advice. And all of a sudden I was like a fish out of water. It's like, what's my agenda here? Oh, I have no agenda. Oh, so I'm just asking questions. I'm just listening with no like outcome in mind. And it was when I got comfortable with it, which was a process, right? It was like a breath of fresh air because I could just be curious and just ask questions and just listen. And the insights from that, I ate my words, ultimately were invaluable to the business because I hadn't had a conversation. I had lots of conversations, never had conversations strictly focused on customer research before.
For sure. Yeah. And I just remember you coming back from that exercise, and I don't know if you remember this document that you were kind of noting things, or I don't know how we got to like a documentation of all of this, and the phrase marketing system kept coming up. Like people kept saying to you this marketing system, and I just remember this aha moment which you had, which a lot of our clients have, whatever it is for them. We were like, we got to figure out how to put that into how we're marketing and how we're talking about the results of 90-day pipeline, right? That's not something that people were saying when you would do like a testimonial call or when you would check in with them, or in coaching. They're saying stuff like that because we're getting into just how do they perceive the world and what they want and their goals and what holds them back and what makes them energized, and all of that was just so valuable. So yeah, that's the power of customer listening, right, in a real example.
And it's an interesting example too, because, there were tons of ahas. And certainly we were doing this at a stage that was fairly advanced in terms of the business. A lot of our clients are more in an infancy stage. But, I would say there were no big surprises, just a lot of really good granular data and language and terms that people were using that we picked up and frankly copied and pasted into our marketing with great success.
Right.
So that's the first phase. We run these interviews, have these conversations,
Yeah.
and I think one of the key takeaways, for me there is it's not about presenting an offer, getting feedback, or framing it, nor is it just a simple conversation. We got to be really strategic about the line of questioning. And one quick comment on what you said there
Yeah.
as well. I think a lot of people, they have this superficial kind of expectation that, well, once we understand what the pain points are, then we're good, right? Well, no, your market knows what their pain points are. You knowing that it's not going to deliver any value. The question, in addition to that, to your point, is what are they currently doing to address those pain points, and how is all that working? Because your offer ultimately needs to fit into that landscape of what they've tried and what they haven't tried.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. And I think when we, we talk a lot about in the trainings in 90 Day Pipeline, it's all about, especially in the sales process, how do you kind of perceive the pain and then agitate the pain, or create, create an awareness in your client that their solution is not really going to work, right? If we can know what those solutions are before the sales conversation and we can bring that into our marketing, that's even more effective. So again, that's why we're kind of going in that route with customer listening. So it's very fun, because then it's
And,
like reading your clients' minds, right? They read your marketing and they go, "Are they in my head?" And that's ultimately the power of insights work, customer
and
research.
that's what builds trust, right? When you
Right.
can repeat back to the customer what they're experiencing in words that are
Right.
probably more accurate than they can use, that builds trust.
Yeah.
And I had another thought that I lost, but let's jump into phase two. So now you've done the research, you've asked the right questions, you've got your customer research hat on, you've got all these interesting insights. Now what do you do with them?
For sure. So depending on what those insights were, you either have a mild panic or you are good to go. To say that, for a lot of clients, the interpretation and application of those insights coming out of that first series of calls is it ranges from really straightforward to something that, again, it can cause them a bit of panic because they're hearing stuff that they've never heard before, and it's different than what they thought, right? So a lot of the work that I am helping with as a coach at that stage is to really say, okay, well, what does this mean for you and your offering, and your target market? So some clients are, I learned that actually my target market needs to be slightly shifted to be a slightly different group, because I heard in the interviews that certain kinds of companies are actually not a good fit for me, and I can narrow this down further. Some clients are hearing things that make them need to change the scope of the offering, right? So instead of it being like, 10 miles wide, it's 1 mile wide and 10 miles deep, right? Instead. Or some clients actually learn that they need to have multiple different offers because there's maybe 2 or 3 different situations that might arise in their target market that they are going to continuously encounter, right? So the next piece is really about helping folks to figure out, like, what do you do with the insights you gathered, and how does that apply to the offer that you're trying to validate, the target market that you're trying to validate is the right one for you. And the amazing thing is that in 90 Day Pipeline, the next stage of the process is really going into creating what we call a results mechanism. So this is your articulation of your service that you're providing to that target market. It's a bridge between where that client is now and where they want to get to, that transformation. So we're helping them to, put that together. And then, in terms of customer listening, some clients do need to go back out into the market and bring that new offering out and kind of ask some questions about that. But other clients are, kind of ready to move forward. And it just does just depend on kind of where the issues might lie in terms of their lack of their gap, whatever gaps remain in their understanding. Is the way I think about it.
Yeah, I think the way I think about customer listening is it's like turning the lights on in the room.
Yeah.
A lot of folks, I think, pre-customer research, customer listening, and we're using those terms interchangeably. It's like they're selling in a dark room, right?
Right.
And what they say, the symptoms are, I don't know why no one's buying. I don't know why they're going with other options. I don't know why they're not booking meetings. I don't know why they're not responding. I don't know. It's a lot of unawareness
Right.
because the lights are off. You don't know what your prospect is thinking because every interaction you have with them, you have some agenda to sell or whatever it may be. And customer listening is like turning the lights on. Now we can see. You might not like what you see. But I mean, real talk, right? Like it may not be, you may have had rose-colored glasses on previously, and now you know the truth. And let's not sugarcoat it. I mean, I think you're being pretty forthright here. Sometimes the truth
Yeah.
is difficult to process, especially if you fell in love with your product,
Right.
and you're convinced
Yeah.
your product is the best thing since sliced bread, and
Yeah.
then the market tells you they don't want it. That's
Right.
happened. Tough pill to
Yeah.
swallow.
And the other thing that's really kind of timely, like where we are in 2024 and even the last couple of years, is that markets change. Markets change. So a lot of times, consultants, I'll myself as an example, right? I worked with growth stage venture capital backed startups for many years. And then in 2022, money stopped being free for them and the market changed quite literally overnight. I mean, I had a very solid multi six figure pipeline and it went to literally zero. And Ahmed, you told me you remember that call when I joined as a client. I was like, what do I do? Right. And so because markets change, if we're just always operating on the assumption that the reason that no one's buying or the reason our pipeline is soft or the reason that people aren't returning our calls or whatever is about our marketing, like we're not doing good enough marketing, quote unquote, it's kind of missing the reality, which is that over time markets change, needs change, technologies change, the types of people doing certain kinds of jobs change. Of course, some industries are going to be much more rapid in those changes than others. But if we don't have, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, we don't have a method for actually understanding the current state of the market, we are going to be making the wrong decision in terms of what we're offering, in terms of how we're positioning ourselves, pricing, marketing, you name it. So I think it's really important, especially nowadays, to get a method, for doing this and just face the reality, I mean, we had someone on the strategy call today that I had to tell him, hey, listen, your results, you just don't like them, but they're the results, your market's not buying, find a new market, it happens.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of interesting stories just to illustrate that point, and I'll be a little bit more direct about this. If you don't have a process to engage in customer research that yields quality insights about what your market is thinking, you will be irrelevant soon. Like, sooner than you think, you will be completely irrelevant and out of touch with your market. Couple of interesting data points. I mean, 90-day pipeline, I was consulting for some years before this, but 90-day pipeline is about 6 years old. And we've been fundamentally doing the same thing for 6 years, although it's evolved. And this customer research piece is one of the key evolutions of the process. But I'll tell you what's changed drastically. The marketing has changed drastically. It's not the same as it was 5 or 6 years ago when we were the only such program in the space, and we're still one of few, but we have a lot of perceived alternatives. And therefore, that dynamism in the market, the new alternatives available to the customer, the options that they have required a shift in positioning and messaging that's only enabled by customer research. Otherwise, we'd be shooting in the dark.
Right.
Conversation I had today, to your point as well, along a similar vein with a client who went through the customer listing process under your guidance and essentially found that their core market, and this is a multi 7-figure consulting business, not a small shop, the core market that's represented 80% of their revenue for the past 5 or 6 years, all of a sudden is telling them, we would never hire you today. And there's all kinds of interesting reasons why, and trends and developments in the market that have created that change. But essentially, their cash cow has said, no thanks, tough pill to swallow. But now they're in a position with that data to be able to make some adjustments. It might be a new offer, it might be an adjustment to the offer, it might be a new market, as opposed to spending the next couple of years trying to bark up the wrong tree, thinking that what worked in the past will continue to work, which is a faulty assumption.
Right. For sure. And I think all of us, who have been running our businesses, even if for just a little while, we have such an attachment to it, which is 100% understandable. But with that attachment, it creates an underlying fear, right? A fear of what if it all disappears on us. And so for me, when that did happen to me, the thing that I actually felt empowered by, and I felt more certainty and clarity because of, was I knew I had tools to get myself out of that hole, right? I had tools that I could use, customer research, to actually go and listen to different markets and start to build out offerings that really finally met the very precise and specific needs that people had. And I think if every consultant could have those tools, people would walk into rooms with a lot more assurity, right? You would make different decisions if you knew you always had that tool to rely on. So I think that's part of it too, is that there's a power to it.
Well, it's fundamentally a competitive advantage once you know how to do it.
Yeah.
Right. And so the good news, if you're listening to this, is the vast majority of B2B consultants or service providers in your niche are probably not doing this and not doing it well.
Yeah.
And if you develop this capability and you understand how to, we use fancy words like customer research and customer listening, but what are we talking about? We're talking about fundamentally connecting with your market and understanding what they want and need better than they do in some cases, right? When you know how to do that, I mean, I fundamentally believe the threat to most businesses at this stage is their ability to adapt to change. And that's, this is your hedge. This is your insurance policy. This is your capability that will help you not only adapt to change, but frankly, welcome change and be responsive to change in a way that your competitors probably can't match.
100%. And it's like, you basically get to a place where you can be first to market for any new needs that your target market has. And so, I guess I can share like a real example. I'm currently in the final stages of a proposal, conversation with a prospect, and he has been very transparent and said, you're competing against 3 other firms. The weird thing he said to me about you, Anna, is that your offering, so my results mechanism, the way I'm presenting my services to him, he's like, yours really addresses something beyond what all of these other people are offering. And you're really customizing it. It's like you seem to know a lot about how companies like us are really struggling and dealing with this very particular problem right now. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I'm just trying to say that if I hadn't done customer listening just recently and incorporated that into my thinking of how I'm presenting the problem that I'm solving to that client, I would not have a chance against these 3 other firms because they're bigger than me. This guy doesn't know me at all. I mean, it was like a referral from someone I don't even know, right? So I'm actually getting a seat at the table because I have this first mover advantage, because I'm able to respond to like how this type of company is now, and these competitors don't have that skill. So I think it's really, really powerful when deployed, effectively.
Yeah, and that's maybe one of the most significant understated benefits of doing it is that the more you do it, the better your understanding and the stronger your confidence, right? Because I don't care how insecure you are right now, and many of our clients are insecure when they start. That's okay. You talk to 10 prospective clients who all say the same thing to you over and over and over again about what their pain point is and share the same perspective on their struggle to find a solution. You're going to be pretty confident about what that market needs and your ability to deliver on that promise. And the 11th person you talk to, that confidence is going to shine through.
For sure. And the thing that builds rapport the best in a sales conversation, especially with like someone who's like cold, like you don't know them at all, is to ask them questions that demonstrate your understanding of their market. So you can ask them, in my case, I ask questions like, yeah, have you ever had other people do research, but it just feels like it's thrown over the fence and like no one knows what to do with it like 3 months later? And the person's like, oh yeah, that definitely happens. Not, and then I can share my point of view. But if I didn't know to ask that question, because I didn't know that that's a common experience of my target market and probably a concern they have about working with me, I wouldn't be building rapport that way, right? Like I wouldn't have, it's a great way to kind of, again, show your expertise through your understanding.
Yeah. And there's a conversation to be had here about, and we will probably won't go too deep on it, but this is how I frame it, and I want you to to adjust me if I need adjustment. But the way I frame it is, the point of customer research and customer listening is research, understanding, insight.
Yeah.
The byproduct of it, done well, is you
Right.
should create opportunity. It's not
Right.
the point. It is a
For sure.
byproduct. Because if you're talking to people that have a problem, have pain, are motivated to solve it, and you're having an intelligent conversation about it, they're going to want to know how you can help. And what you just said to me is the key. It's
Right.
your ability to ask intelligent questions that demonstrate your understanding of what they're going through.
Right. 100%. And I think like one of the best traits and strengths of the consultants that we work with in 90 Day Pipeline is that they have this amazing ability to kind of synthesize all this stuff that's coming at them and come up with a great question or a perspective that really ties it all together. It's just that they're so used to using that skill in delivery of their work, right? What we're helping them to do is to see and to actually practice, how can I leverage some of those really strong traits that I have, like really strong? How can I leverage that in a different part of building my business, in a different part of my process, and see that it's all the same thing, all the same things that make consultants great and why companies want to hire consultants are like skills that can be used for the marketing piece of it. So it's just, again, it's helping people like make those connections where they don't currently have, that sense of connection.
Yeah, it's like people say, well, I suck at pitching. Okay, so stop pitching.
Right.
And let's actually use the skills that you have as a consultant, your ability to understand problems and prescribe solutions. Let's double down on that skill in a customer research context. And then the upside of that is they don't feel like they're being sold to, the client.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
the old
Because
adage is what? No one likes to be sold to, but everyone
Exactly.
loves to buy.
Yeah, exactly.
Anna, we've
Yeah,
covered a lot of really good ground here. Anything that you feel like we haven't touched on that's important to highlight before we wrap up?
just looking at my notes. Oh, how to know if your offer is validated. Did we touch on that?
What's the line in the sand? No, we haven't.
So, for me, the hard line in the sand is your offer is validated when you've sold it to someone in your target market, right? And I think that line is a pretty uncomfortable thing for a lot of folks to kind of really consider, because again, we all want to live in this like pie in the sky world where we come up with this idea and then suddenly it's viable, right? But there is a process, and for some of our clients it's a longer process than others, again just depending on where they're starting. Where the best way to validate an offer, the only way I would consider an offer validated is if it's sold at least once, and I would really consider it validated if you've sold it more than once, right? So the journey is really, how can I use my consultative skills, my customer listening skills, my sales skills that we're teaching folks in 90 Day Pipeline? How can I use all of those skills in combination to really make sure that what I'm going to end up landing on as my like signature flagship offering is something that my target market really wants to buy? So yeah,
Nothing happens until money changes hands.
that's right.
I can tell there's a transaction and someone writes a check or signs a contract. There are, I would say, reasons to feel confident about an offer and reasons to believe that it can get traction along the way, lead indicators, if you will, but nothing's really validated until there's a transaction. And I think what people do, and what a common mistake here is, people will use marketing as a kind of like a stall tactic or a distraction from actually validating the offer. And it's like, I've talked to 10 people about this and none of them bought, but let me go out and do some marketing and talk to more people, as if the next 10 will somehow magically buy. And it's a nice fantasy, but the truth is there's probably something fundamentally flawed in the offer.
For sure. Yeah. And that's, I think about everything from kind of this like classic entrepreneurial sort of a way. It's like, what is the fastest way for me to exchange money for services in the case of consulting? That will tell me everything I need to know about how much I should price it and what it's worth and all that stuff, right? And we can do as much as we can do in terms of the process we're helping people with in 90 Day Pipeline. But again, we need people to have the mindset of like, I'm here to sell things. That's why I'm doing marketing, is to sell things, right? And so this is again just part of doing that.
And speed is important, right? And I think there's an important point here to be made around, you know, we help people validate their offers and ultimately take those offers to the market. But I don't think the offer is always perfect. It's
No.
not perfect the first time around. The goal here is speed of conversion in a transaction, and there will be optimization to be had down the road. Is that a fair statement?
For sure. And I mean, I'll use myself as an example. If I were to look back at the results mechanism that I created in 2020 in 90-day pipeline, I mean, that thing is not good, to be honest with you, because it's not, it got me started, but my thinking, my expertise, my market, it's all continued to evolve. And I would say like what I have now is so compelling to that market, again, because of I'm just implementing all these skills for like many years now. But it takes time for people to get to there. And it also is like, I would tell you that 4 years ago, for me, the first set of results mechanisms that I created, it was multiple of them because I didn't yet have a way to kind of synthesize that all into, something that I have now, which is more of this kind of, it's a different way of, positioning myself. So I think it does take time, but we shouldn't let the time it takes get in the way of making money and making sales. So again, between 4 years and now, I've made a lot of sales. It's just that finalizing of the offer and validating of the offer has taken quite a bit of time.
Well, I tell this story in I think one of our trainings inside the program, and we'll maybe wrap up on this. When I first built 90-day pipeline, I maybe didn't think about it in these terms, but what I was seeking to validate was an offer that sells, works, and scales in that sequence. So first I was like, what are people going to buy? So I built out an offer, did some customer listening. Actually, first customer listening, I managed to by accident do this in the right sequence back then. That's purely by accident, to be candid. I did some customer listening. I built out an offer. It was a 2-page program outline. I still have it. I show it to people, and that's all it was. I had nothing built out. There was no material. There was nothing. It was a 2-pager. It was a promise. I went back to my customer listening candidates or interviewees, if you will. I made them an offer. It was about speed. It's a now thing. It was priced to sell, frankly. It wasn't expensive. Wasn't perfect. They bought it. And then the next question became, okay, it sells. Does it work? In other words, are they going to get the value? Because it was a new delivery model for me, right? Will they get the value I'm promising? Will they get results? And will they get some positive client testimonials and case studies? And that took, at the time it was an 8-week program. That took me 8 weeks to validate. Once I started feeling good about that, the next question was, okay, does it scale? And scale in the sense of, I had certain volume goals at the time that were certainly smaller than where we are today, but scales in a relative sense, meaning will it be able to provide the kind of volume that I'm looking for at this stage of my business? And that took me a handful of a few more sales to be able to deliver and come to a conclusion on the right model that's going to scale. And that's evolved several times since. So in case that's helpful for people, when we talk about validation, we focused on the first piece, which is does it sell, which is really what we help clients with fundamentally. But then there's a second and third part, which is does it work and does it scale? And that's a much longer time horizon to solve those problems.
Absolutely.
Anna, we covered a lot of ground in a relatively short amount of time. So appreciate you coming on. I think this is going to give folks a really good grasp of the customer research process and where it fits into validating a B2B consulting offer. Folks, if you're looking for help with this, feel free to head over to 90daypipeline.com/talk. Book an appointment with our team, see if it's a good fit. And this may be the first of many conversations you'll have with me and Anna on this subject. Thanks, Anna.
You're welcome. Thank you.